I never imagined I'd end up in the middle of a neighborhood uprising, but here I am. Life in Willow Creek Meadows had been uneventful for 5 years. Peaceful, even. That all changed when Lorraine Patterson, who the neighborhood had secretly nicknamed Madam Clipboard, was elected as the new HOA chairperson 6 months ago. From the moment she stepped into her new role, Lorraine seemed less interested in community unity and more focused on turning our pleasant little neighborhood into some sort of sterile showroom, micromanaging everything from mailbox angles to lawnmower decibel levels. My name's Richard Hale, and I've worked as a licensed municipal land surveyor for over 15 years. Not the flashiest job, which is probably why no one at block parties paid much attention to what I did for a living, including Lorraine. Most people just knew me as the guy who kept to himself in the beige house at the cul-de-sac's end. But as it turns out, my career in mapping property lines, verifying coordinates, and navigating zoning laws would soon put me at the very center of a neighborhood drama I hadn't signed up for. It all began when Lorraine issued a mandatory compliance upgrade, requiring all homes to replace their house numbers. According to the memo, taped obnoxiously to every door, they now had to be black, 5 inches tall, and in a font called Regal Slate. Apparently, this font was a timeless standard of elegance and clarity, according to Lorraine's note. Which was interesting, because the county's emergency services guidelines actually recommend white on dark contrast for better visibility, numbers between 4 and 6 inches, and make no mention of a mandatory typeface. But I decided it wasn't worth making a fuss. I ordered the new numbers, installed them exactly to Lorraine's specs, and moved on with my life. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, I received a violation slip on my porch, courtesy of the HOA, claiming my numbers weren't aligned properly. I was instructed to move them exactly 3 inches to the right so they would line up with some imaginary aesthetic grid Lorraine had cooked up. I was floored. I went through the HOA handbook that night with a fine-toothed comb. Not a single mention of precise number positioning, just that they be clearly visible from the road. So I decided to call her directly. "Lorraine, this is Richard Hale from 782 Willow Glen," I began. "I got a notice about my house numbers, but I can't find any actual rule requiring a specific alignment." Her tone was syrupy but cold. "Richard, the HOA board has determined that consistent placement contributes to visual harmony. You have 14 days to comply or be fined. Could you point me to where that's written? I'm looking at the bylaws, and I'm not seeing it." "The board has discretion in matters of appearance," she replied curtly. "It was discussed in the last meeting, which you didn't attend." "Then I'd like to review the minutes, please." "They'll be online in 30 days, she snapped. "But the notice stands." I hung up, equal parts baffled and irritated. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was nonsense. And I wasn't about to shift my numbers over 3 inches just because Lorraine wanted them to line up like synchronized swimmers. I wrote a respectful but firm email outlining how my house numbers were fully compliant with both the HOA's written guidelines and the county's emergency visibility standards. I never got a reply. Instead, 15 days later, I received a formal notice, $50 fine for failure to comply. So much for reason. I filed an official appeal with the HOA board and requested a hearing. I figured if nothing else, maybe I could make them realize how ridiculous this was. But what happened next pushed the whole situation into territory I couldn't ignore. I returned from a 3-day trip out of town. I'd been consulting on a land use survey for a major regional infrastructure project, and found my house had been tampered with. Not just the house numbers moved, no. They'd been replaced entirely. Still the same font, yes, but now mounted on a gaudy silver panel I definitely hadn't approved. Furious, I went straight to my doorbell camera footage. Sure enough, there she was. Lorraine, wearing oversized sunglasses like she was on a covert mission, along with her tag-along enforcer, Greg, a retired pharmacist who'd somehow appointed himself the neighborhood compliance deputy. They had brought a cordless drill and simply gone to work on my front facade. That was it. Game on. First, I documented everything: photos of the unauthorized install, downloaded security footage, and a printed timeline of every email and notice. Then I took a step no one else in the neighborhood could have easily taken. I pulled the official parcel maps and public zoning records for Willow Creek Meadows. As a municipal surveyor, I had secure access to these files. What I found was more than eye-opening. Lorraine's decorative number plaques weren't just aesthetic flourishes. They were subtly shifting the visual boundary markers of properties by around 4 inches in most cases. That may not sound like much, but in tight suburban lots where fences, easements, and utilities sometimes rely on very specific measurements. 4 inches can be the difference between a harmless decoration and a property dispute. The next HOA meeting was the following Thursday. Normally I avoided those, the same 10 people discussing whose grass was too long and whether backyard trampolines should be banned. But this time, I had purpose. I walked in wearing my official city-issued land surveyor badge. The room was half full, and Lorraine was already halfway through a slideshow titled, Cluttered Porch Syndrome, A Rising Crisis. She paused when she saw me. Her eyes flicked to my badge, and a hint of panic crept into her expression before she masked it with that smug smile she wore like armor. "Richard," she said with mock cheer, "we'll address personal violations at the end during open comment." I returned the smile. "Actually, Lorraine, I'm here tonight in my professional role. As a municipal surveyor with the city of Brookside, I need to present an issue involving unauthorized alterations to legal property markers within this community." The chatter in the room died immediately. Lorraine's smile froze, and she gripped the podium like it might float her away from this conversation. "That's not on tonight's agenda," she said stiffly. "This isn't an agenda item," I replied calmly. "It's a legal matter that directly affects HOA liability. If you'll permit me, I'll present what I've found." Greg shifted awkwardly in his seat. A few people turned to whisper. I stepped forward, plugged in my laptop, and brought up the relevant zoning overlays, overlaying them with photos of Lorraine's new number plaques. Then I played the doorbell footage for the room. Several gasps. A muttered, "She really went up and did it." Then I flipped to the slide that mattered most. Section 12.4.9 of the City Code. Altering or relocating visual boundary identifiers or structural markers, including address numerals, without permit and supervision of a licensed surveyor, is subject to a minimum penalty of $500 per infraction. These address plaques shift official reference points used in city maps and emergency response layouts. They are not merely cosmetic. They are boundary indicators, and they were modified without permits. I let that sit for a beat. Lorraine's jaw was clenched tight. "That's absurd," she finally said. "The HOA is well within its rights to approve aesthetic updates." "Cosmetic, sure," I nodded. "Boundary markers, absolutely not. And so far, I've verified 19 homes where these plaques altered the original number placement beyond the legal boundary margin." Someone muttered behind me, "You mean we could get fined for this?" "Each modification represents a separate municipal code violation," I said. "That's potentially $9,500 in cumulative fines, not counting correction costs." The room erupted. Homeowners shouted over one another. Lorraine banged a wooden gavel against the podium. "Order. This is nothing but fear tactics." But her authority was rapidly dissolving. That's when Michelle, a long-standing board member and former Lorraine loyalist, raised her hand slowly. "Actually," she said, "per Article 6, Section 3 of our Charter, fines resulting from actions initiated by the board, especially those not voted on in a full session, are the responsibility of the individuals involved, not the HOA budget." Lorraine turned crimson. "I move that we suspend the house number enforcement policy," Michelle continued, "and authorize immediate restoration of all modified address placements to their original positions, before we rack up even more municipal violations." "I second," came another voice. Within a minute, the board had voted. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Greg. Lorraine had no choice but to gavel in the motion's approval. After the meeting, Lorraine stormed up to me, seething. "You ambushed me." "No," I said, adjusting my badge. "I informed you. There's a difference." She pointed a finger at me. "This isn't the end." "Actually," I said, "it just might be. The city will be mailing you a citation for the violation on my home. $500, payable in 30 days, and tampering with municipal markers. That carries an additional $250 fee." Her expression was priceless, an entire emotional meltdown compressed into 3 seconds. I walked home that night under the soft glow of the streetlights, stopping to admire the simple, properly placed black numbers on my front wall, 5 inches tall, legible, and now officially above reproach.